Hello, this is a reading of Ranger in Time, Night of Soldiers and Spies, and we're reading chapter 2 today, Pop, Boom, Bang. Our vocabulary for this chapter is as follows. Number 1, official, formally approved by a proper authority. Number 2, ignore, refuse to take notice of or acknowledge, disregard intentionally. And number 3, nuzzled, rubbed or pushed against gently with the nose and mouth. Chapter 2 reading, Pop, Boom, Bang. You can follow along in your book on page 7. Happy 4th of July, Ranger, Luke said. I saved the last piece of my hot dog for you. He leaned down and fed it to Ranger under the picnic table. Ranger was just finishing when he saw a flash of brown out of the corner of his eye. Squirrel! Ranger darted out from under the table and chased the squirrel all around the yard. He chased it past Mom's garden, up the porch steps, and down again. When the squirrel climbed a tree, Ranger sat at the bottom, barking. Got out, run again, Ranger, Sadie said, and bent down to pat his head. That was all right. Ranger didn't know what he'd do if he ever caught a squirrel anyway. He just liked chasing them. Squirrels were the reason Ranger wasn't an official search and rescue dog. Ranger had done all kinds of training with Luke and Dad. He'd practiced finding Luke in the woods and in big warehouses with boxes all over. He'd even practiced finding him when Luke was buried in the snow. Ranger was very good at finding people. But to be an official search and rescue dog, you had to pass a test. And to pass the test, you had to ignore everything except your job. You had to ignore cats and crowds of people and juicy hot dogs dropped in front of you. You even had to ignore squirrels. On the day of Ranger's test, a squirrel had run out in front of him. Ranger chased it, even though Dad said no. Ranger knew Luke wasn't really lost. He was just pretending. If a real person had needed help, Ranger would have left the squirrel alone. But that didn't matter. He didn't pass his test, so he didn't get to be a search and rescue dog. Now he could chase as many squirrels as he liked. Finish up and let's clear the table, Mom said. We should get Ranger inside before the fireworks start. Ranger loved 4th of July hot dogs, but he didn't like the fireworks one bit. They hurt his ears. He always hid under the blanket in his dog bed until the popping and booming ended. Ranger followed Luke and Sadie inside. He stayed in the mudroom while they went to the kitchen to get marshmallows. As soon as they left, Ranger heard a soft humming sound coming from his bed. Ranger pawed at his blanket until he uncovered the old first aid kit he dug up from the garden one day. The humming was louder now. Ranger had heard that sound before. The old metal box only hummed when someone far away needed Ranger's help. Once it had taken him to a great ship that was about to sink in a frigid sea. Another time it had taken him to a dusty prairie where a boy and his family were starting out on a dangerous journey. And once it had taken him to a city shaken by an earthquake where a girl and her friend were running from fires. Now the first aid kit was humming again. Ranger lowered his head and nuzzled the strap over his neck. The humming got louder. Light spilled from the cracks in the old metal box. It grew brighter and brighter. Too bright. Ranger had to close his eyes. He felt as if he were being squeezed through a hole in the sky. Suddenly, the humming stopped. Ranger opened his eyes. It was half dark out, just like it had been at home, but a cool rain had replaced the warm summer weather. Fog and whispers floated through the air as men ran quietly toward a riverbank. Hush now and hurry, one of them ordered. We're running out of time. Chapter 2, Comprehension Questions. According to the information in this chapter, when did the old metal first aid box Ranger found in the garden begin to hum? Sample answer. In Chapter 2, we learn that the old metal first aid box Ranger found in the garden only hummed when someone far away needed Ranger's help. And that last part is a quotation. Question number 2. What unbelievable thing is the author asking us to accept by the end of this chapter? Sample answer. The unbelievable thing the author is asking us to accept by the end of this second chapter is that this old metal first aid box transports Ranger back in time. In this case, Ranger is transported back to the American Revolution. And this takes us to chapter number 3.